Welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Angel Baby Kyra. Make sure you like, subscribe, follow me on Instagram and TikTok and Substack where you can find a deeper dive into this. And today we're going to be talking about American Apparel, the new documentary that came out on Netflix. I think that it's very important to talk about these things, especially like working in the fashion industry. I feel like these kinds of things always get like swept under the rug. I had no idea about like history of American Apparel. Like honestly, I only like knew about like their downfall and it's because of like their recession and just like not really smart like business or financial decisions. I didn't understand all that was going on like in the workplace, so we're going to talk about it today. We want to warn that there are sensitive topics, so if any of these are triggering for you, I suggest that you click off and I'll see you guys in the next episode. We're going to go back in time for a little bit. We're going to go to when American Apparel first started out. If you're around during the early 2010s, chances are American Apparel is on your Tumblr dashboard, on your body, or both. But beneath the disco pants and grainy flash photography was a darker story that still hasn't ended. Today we're diving into the pop culture impact, the manipulative marketing, and abusive power structures that defined American Apparel and still echoes to this day. So first, we're going to talk about American Apparel as a pop culture time capsule. The uniform of this era and the indie sleaze aesthetic that has again become popular as Gen Z likes to characterize a lot of aesthetics. During the time, in my opinion, aesthetics wasn't really a thing. Nobody really called it like indie sleaze, you know? If anything, the only thing that I heard during this time was hipster aesthetic. Girl in the documentary said that she wanted to be this like hipster bicyclist. I don't think it's really funny because that's how I remember this time, was like liking that aesthetic too. I feel like a lot of people that gravitated towards this indie sleaze aesthetic or hipster aesthetic during this time are what you could consider alternative, or what was alt during this time that wasn't goth or emo, which was also a very big kind of characteristic for this time as well. American Apparel was the epitome of indie sleaze. It was the uniform of indie sleaze. Think about like the Cobra Snake, for example, was someone really emulated American Apparel and what is indie sleaze. Also Katy Perry, I know she was into like kind of that before she became more mainstream. I just like flicked my titty. More mainstream and like pop. American Apparel was interesting because it was doing the exact opposite of what fashion was doing at the time. We had a lot of like bright colors, neon colors, chevron print, of that nature, right? These were what I would personally call normies, or basically just like girl aesthetic during this time. And something that's kind of a side note is that I tried to emulate these aesthetics, but I always felt like I could never achieve it. And I like just realized this past like 2 years was that I was trying to emulate white people aesthetics, and why I always felt like I needed to try to make myself fit into something, and having like a hipster aesthetic even still like really gravitates towards like white aesthetic or white culture, if you want to call it that. American Apparel was minimalist but provocative. All the marketing was very sleazy, provocative, obviously very controversial, but it was still very minimalist. One of the ads that they ran was a girl with her legs spread open. I'm gonna have to blur it because of YouTube, and I don't want this video like taken down or getting copyrighted or whatever they want to do to it. You guys get the idea. Very non-clothing, very skimpy, and of that nature. However, this is what drew in a lot of people that were looking for some kind of, I guess you would say, sexual liberation, which is something that the CEO we'll talk about later will say that's what kind of wanted to do with American Apparel. And also they kind of boasted that this like American Apparel was like made in US, so that was also kind of like a selling point that we didn't really see that much because hardly any fashion brands ever made their clothing in the US, so that's kind of like another thing that they like to pride themselves on. This brand sold lifestyle as much as it sold clothes, and it was raw, hip, and unapologetically liberated in sexual wants and needs. This wasn't just fashion, it was mood board culture before Pinterest was even a big thing. I know Pinterest was around during that time because I was using it. But it came with a very real edge of danger, especially in the workplace. So sex and marketing obviously is a very old kind of marketing gimmick that Hollywood loves to use. I'm talking about Hollywood because, LA, it's a lot of marketing, right? When we think of marketing, we think of Hollywood, we think of movies, we think of fashion, we think of music, we think of anything that's like pop culture related. And sex sells always because we're gravitated towards sex, right? Because it's something not everyone likes for the most part, I guess I would say. But sex always sells because it always brings eyes, because it always interests people. Man or woman, non-binary, femme, whatever you identify as. Now, people love to use controversy as strategy. Is that saying that any press is good press? And this is what American Apparel, I personally feel like, ran with. And as someone in marketing, I feel like obviously this was kind of not the cheap way out or like the easy way out, but I do think it was really honing in on this sexual liberation era. Like I think it was at the VMAs when Britney Spears, that part, and using queerness as kind of as a bait, and that's like early 2000s, mid 2000s. Queerness was still like not very accepted, and it was like kind of a controversial thing still. Dove Charney was known for insisting on shooting many of the ads himself. So we go into this very murky water of these young girls going into this thinking that this is their big break, because American Apparel was the it girl during this time. Everyone wanted to be on American Apparel ads, at least in the industry's culture. American Apparel didn't just market sex, it marketed power, access, and intimacy. And that leads us to the man behind it all, Dove Charney's cult of control. So the CEO, Dove Charney, he is also shown in this documentary, has been accused of multiple instances of SA and harassment by former employees. In this documentary, there are clips of him verbally abusing his staff and his employees. During this documentary, they interview some of the ex-staff, and a lot of them seem so reminiscent about American Apparel and being so excited and like reliving those things, but also talking about the grisly reality of working under Dove Charney. A lot of them didn't have experience in the fashion industry. One of the main guys that was talking about his experience, he had a learning disability, and it was hard for him to get any kind of jobs, and he loved fashion, and he saw like a hiring ad for American Apparel, so he decided to go in and give the girl that was like the person that's like doing a hiring process his resume, which he says was like pretty much blank because like I said, he couldn't get any jobs or experience. And she kind of tossed it aside and said, well, what do you want to do? Like, where do you see yourself? And I forgot what he said, but obviously he wanted to do something like within the fashion, like styling maybe, or merchandising, whatever the fuck. And she's like, okay, you start next week. And then of course he was ecstatic. I can't like imagine how exciting that would have felt to be part of this big brand that's up and coming. Everyone's talking about it. I think that obviously a lot of people were excited. I would be excited too. And I like that how some of the people that were interviewed were like, oh, it was based like on just vibes and not really like your skill set. Like I said, a lot of them didn't have any kind of skill set to be qualified for any of these roles, maybe like as marketing or outreach, PR, etc. Going back to his allegations, Dove Charney has allegations such as coercion, doing stuff to himself in front of staff, and inappropriate relationships with underage workers. He was removed from American Apparel 2014 but was never criminally charged. And to this day, he owns and operates Los Angeles Apparel, his current clothing company. In the Netflix documentary, he's shown saying that he doesn't care about the allegations. There are also clips of him, like I said, verbally abusing staff, screaming, swearing, and humiliating them. And also the staff were kind of under this like cult-like mentality where when they found out that this woman had come out and spoken out against Dove. There's like this one clip where there's women who are also employees saying, oh, she's doing it for money, or Dove is like a good guy, they like working for him. So like victim blaming, right? Because They probably didn't want the repercussions or get retaliated against. They did say anything negative against Dove, right? And that's kind of how these like cult leaders kind of work. Dove Charney didn't just cross workplace boundaries, he crossed so many lines that were detrimental to people's lives, and he's still able to be in the fashion industry. And this just like boggles my mind. But again, no one in this pop culture, fashion industry, music industry, art scene, whatever, Hollywood, hardly ever gets reprimanded. Manipulation, aspirations, and the 48 laws of power. So I want to talk about this because I thought this was interesting. Barney weaponized people's dreams of working in fashion, particularly young women artists and immigrants. He offered just enough to keep people going: photo shoots, exposure, a job title, but never real autonomy for them to be able to progress outside of a job of American Apparel and progress to like a higher role in a different company. So it kind of like sealed in this like toxic cycle that he was implementing. Employees report being kept in toxic cycles with just enough money or access to feel valued, but not enough to grow on their own. One employee in the doc says, "He gave you just enough to survive, but never enough to leave." So the 48 laws of power, I want to talk about it because this is what came in the welcome kits. The welcome kits included a vibrator, a Leica camera, a BlackBerry, and the 48 laws of power. Robert Greene, the author of 48 Laws, was actually on American Apparel's board. The 48 laws of power was Charney's Bible, and he adhered to this very closely. And we see in the documentary that the ex-employees never read the book, and they finally read it on the documentary. I'm sure they read it before the show, you know, it's all scripted and stuff. But they read it and they're like, oh, this is Dove to the T. This is what he does. The book is about manipulation, dominance, and strategy. And Charney inhaled and lived this day to day. He turned manipulation to a corporate structure. He turned power into culture. So the last part is the downfall and what's left behind. American Apparel filed for bankruptcy twice, 2015 and 2016. Dove Charney was removed as CEO in 2014 after mounting lawsuits and internal pressure. Brand was bought by Gildan and stripped of its provocative identity, but the imagery and influence lives on, especially as indie sleaze has made a comeback on TikTok. And this is what I was saying in the beginning, that indie sleaze, you say indie sleaze to me, I think of American Apparel, I think of shiny leggings. I had envied everyone during this time that got to shop at American Apparel. My mom didn't understand why I liked it because it was basics for a really expensive price. Obviously, they get away with it because they can say that it's American made. I know that we're romanticizing the aesthetic, but forgetting the system behind it and the man still pulling the strings. I think it's really important to understand these brands are hardly ever ethical, hardly ever treating their employees right. And I think that this needs to stop in the fashion industry, but it comes to the question, how do we stop these things and how do we hold people accountable when the system is made by men? The patriarchy never lets us rest or get any kind of justice for the injustices that are placed upon us when we're just trying to make a living wage, trying to go to work, trying to get experience and have, you know, a career. American Apparel might have fallen, but Dove Charney didn't. He's still running a nearly identical company, Los Angeles Apparel, using the same playbook. So the question is, will we keep glamorizing this aesthetic or finally hold it accountable? And I think like not so much as like holding accountable the aesthetic, but the person behind the aesthetic. And yes, he created something that was very long lasting, and obviously its longevity is something of nostalgia that a lot of Gen Z are craving, millennials are craving this time. But I think it really is important to understand the person behind this very popular aesthetic. Let me know in the comments your experience or memory of American Apparel. The link to the Google Doc with full sources and citations will also be in the description, and if you want to watch it on Netflix, I suggest that you do and do your own research as well. Subscribe for more fashion commentary. I'm trying to do more Hot Take Mondays, but it has been a struggle. But I really appreciate you guys. Why did I say it like that? I appreciate you guys being here and commenting, and I get so overwhelmed, so I try not to look at the comments, but I do appreciate it when you comment and like this video and subscribe. I hope you guys learned something watching on this video, and I really hope you guys watch the documentary as well. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye!